Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, kindly hosted by MyKindaFuture. I'm your facilitator today, so I'm Tom. I'm the Membership Development Manager at the ISE. Just to let you know, before I hand over to the team at MyKindaFuture, I wanted to let you know to really make sure that you are putting your questions in the question box, which will be on your dashboard on your right, and the team will be answering your questions at the end of the presentation. And we'd really like to get your questions on there so we can really engage and have a good chat towards the end. But for now, I will leave you in the great hands of the team, MyKindaFuture, and Simon, if you'd like to introduce what you're going to be talking about today.
Fantastic, thanks, Tom. Thanks, Tom, for that introduction. Yeah, delighted to be hosting today's session. So. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Simon. I'm the Strategic Lead for Talent at MyKindaFuture, and I'm also the Honorary Vice President at the Institute for Student Employers, so at the ISE, and I've been leading the work that we've been doing at the ISE to shape how we're going to support our members around apprenticeship. So this is obviously a topic very close to my heart as an individual. So, and for those of you who don't know who MyKindaFuture are, we're specialists in the attraction, engagement, hiring and retention of overlooked and diverse talent. And we're also the people behind the technology platform Connector, which is a candidate and employee experience platform that ensures everyone feels a sense of belonging at every stage of their recruitment and employee journey into an organization. So reducing renege rates, diversity of hires, and so on. So that's who we are. And so delighted to be on the session today. I'm just very quickly going to ask my two colleagues who are going to be sharing insights today to do a very quick introduction, and then you'll hear a bit more from them later. So Steph, can I ask you just to quickly introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Steph. I am the Head of School Partnerships at MyKindaFuture. My role is to be the advocate for young people and the schools and all education establishments. And I lead on all the campaign and delivery that we have and that we deliver for young people and engaging them, inspiring them for a successful future career.
Fantastic. Thank you, Steph. And Jack?
Yep, hi all. I sit in our engagement team at MyKindaFuture. We effectively run and shape application processes for a range of clients across a variety of sectors, running it from the attraction stage all the way through to, in a lot of cases, the delivery of assessment centres.
Great, thank you, Jack. So you can see the agenda on your screen, so you'll see that what Steph is going to be sharing and talking about, and what Jack is going to be sharing about. So you can see that. And what I thought I'd just do is give a little bit of context to this crazy COVID-19 world that we're all living in, which is obviously very challenging and difficult for everybody. And we've certainly seen it have a really significant impact in the apprenticeship market. I'm sure a lot of you will have seen the really great research that the ISE have done to show what impact it's had on hiring numbers for this year, and that they are going to be less. And also a complete drop-off of all face-to-face activity, which has led to all of us having to put huge amounts of effort into repivoting our activity to look at virtual attraction, virtual selection and assessment days. And I'm sure lots of you will have been involved in that. Also work experience, you know, we've seen a couple of really significant outcomes there, either sadly work experience cancelled, or it being made virtual and typically over a shorter period of time. So a huge amount of change and challenge in a really short period of time. And what's clear is, you know, with the huge amount of uncertainty and fast change, no one's got all the answers, and certainly not right now. And so it's very much, you know, how do we cope and what do we do? And I think it's been really great to see all across the ISE how we've really come together as a community to share experiences, what we're hearing, what we're seeing, what we're doing, because I think that's how all of us are going to get through this. And certainly our big focus today with this session is to build on that sharing and just give you the insights that we've got, both in terms of what we do, but also with the different work we're doing with our clients, to help you with some of the decisions you've got to make, with some of the things that you're looking to do within your organization. So very much about sharing to help us all come out of this inevitably different, but hopefully all stronger. So that's what we are planning to do. So we're going to kick off with Steph. So Steph, you're obviously going to be very much talking today from a point of view of schools and their students, and what do they need from us as employers. So we've got a series of questions that I'm going to be posing of Steph that she's going to be then answering. And absolutely, as Tom said at the beginning, if you've got questions as we go along, please do pop them into the chat box, and we'll try and pick up as many as we can at the end. So Steph, first question, in terms of school, the school leaver piece and schools and what we can do to support them, what are some of the main challenges that you're seeing and hearing for school leavers in view of the current climate, Steph?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we need to remember that underpinning all of the challenges that I'll talk about and that we talk about throughout this webinar, there is a real sense of uncertainty for these school leavers and young people. I know we're all experiencing that uncertainty, but they're really doing it within a context of a lack of infrastructure around them that they're used to. So, you know, they're not going to a physical school, and that sort of stability has really been taken away from them. So real uncertainty in all aspects, especially their future. So that uncertainty really does lead to some anxiety around their future, and that's really important to remember, I think, throughout the whole of this conversation. And one of the main challenges that school leavers are facing, which many of us will have heard about, is through the lack of exams and how this is going to affect their grades. Obviously, we know that grade requirements and qualifications are a huge part of taking their next steps in their career and starting their career journey. So a real lack of knowledge around what their grades are going to look like is really exacerbating that uncertainty. For a lot of students, the notion of grades being taken from their coursework or their predicted grades is not a positive one for them. I think a lot of young people will have been working at a certain level, but having that idea in mind that they'll pull it out of the bag when it comes to exams. And now this is no longer going to be an option for them. And so real worry about what those grade requirements are now going to look like without that opportunity to take an exam and really kind of come out at the end with something really good. They're really unsure of how employers are responding. We work in these circles, we work in careers education and early talent, and so we hear a lot about what is happening. But if you think about the individual young person, they won't be hearing all of what we're talking about in the conversations that we're having. So really unsure of how employers are directly responding to them as school leavers and the opportunities they might have had or might still have for them, and similarly how universities are going to react to those grade changes as well. So I think, part of this conversation is just having that empathy around their current situation. It's really exacerbating some of those normal quandaries that they have as school leavers. That normal, shall I go to university? Shall I do an apprenticeship? Those normal uncertainties are now being exacerbated by the fact that school structure isn't around them. They might not be getting that information from where the sources that they would normally get it from, and that's a real concern. And so really my point to kind of alleviate some of those worries is around communications. As employers, we have a responsibility to communicate with those school leavers and really tell them, what are we going to do about grade requirements? Are we going to be recruiting for next year? And that information really is the key way in alleviating some of those concerns.
Fantastic, thank you, Steph. So yeah, definitely sounds like part of the comms that employers are putting out to young people make it really clear about grade requirements and their hiring plans. That's really useful. Absolutely. Thank you. And then similar question, Steph, but with a view to the teachers and careers leaders themselves. What's going on in their world and making their life challenging?
So as you can imagine, I'm sure a lot of kind of worries and challenges that teachers and career leaders are facing. So obviously the current context is a real disruption of normal teaching and learning. We know that teaching and learning is the absolute foundation of education, and there's been an unrivaled disruption of that than what we've ever seen, and they're really trying to play catch up in a lot of areas to try and make sure they can offer the best education that they can for their young people. So one of the things they're really grappling with tech solutions. Schools and education institutions are notorious for being a bit behind the times in terms of tech. Well, this context is really forcing them to up their game. They're really trying to understand how that's going to work, how it's working for their young people, and what impact that's going to have on their education and achievements. But one of the real concerns in regards to tech solutions is the safeguarding that comes with it, and being really sure that those tech solutions like Google Hangouts or Zoom are able to give them the security that they need to ensure for their young people. And I know that's a real concern for them. As well as that connection that they have with their young people. I think sometimes, we forget that they're spending all day together normally in schools, and without that, that's a real challenge. Feeling kind of, we talk about this sense of belonging being really important, and that's definitely important for those young people and teachers. Again, on the flip side of the grades, a lot of responsibility is being put on teachers now to be the ones to kind of put those grades forward for those young people. That's never normally the case, and so they're really trying to grapple with the idea of how can I best be fair, what's the best way to do this. They've obviously never been in this situation before, and for career leaders specifically, there is there is a goal of reaching the Gatsby benchmarks by the end of 2020, and with the stripping away of this face-to-face engagement that they all had planned for the spring and summer term right now, we're worried about the fact that they're not going to be able to meet some of those obligations, and a lot of their plans and efforts have been scrapped. So there's a real worry about that, and how can we meet them digitally, and really that's where MyKindaFuture is coming in to try and support them in meeting those digitally. But ultimately, uncertainty again is that's for everyone. That's always going to be the answer to what challenges are they facing, how to plan lessons, how to plan a lot of what they propose for their young people. So really, for career leaders especially, employers really highlighting the way that their activity and outreach supports those Gatsby benchmarks will go some way in alleviating some of those concerns that especially career leaders have.
Thank you, Steph. Yeah, so I think key takeaway for me on that one is, as employers, when you're reaching out to do activities with schools, if you can really highlight how it's going to support them with Gatsby, that's going to go a long way. So thanks, Steph.
Yeah,
next
absolutely.
Question. With schools essentially not being around and difficult to get hold of, and obviously also the potential of face-to-face activity likely postponed at least until the autumn term and possibly into the autumn term, what do educators want from employers now?
I think firstly they want a sense of empathy and understanding for their context. So I've spoken a bit about that context that teachers and career leaders find themselves in. So a real empathy and understanding for the fact that they might not be tech savvy, they might be inundated, that they're grappling themselves with a lot of changes. So that empathy and understanding really is at the forefront of that. But also some clarity, and if you're able to offer any certainty about your hiring processes or your grade qualifications, some clarity and certainty around that will definitely go a long way. if as an employer that you do have relationships with schools already, and it's not something that you're starting, really fostering those relationships now, really important. Things like being more patient with email communication. Again, schools are notorious for being slow in that sometimes, so just being even more patient and understanding with those relationships, and really showing that support right now will prove really fruitful in the future. Not to plug MyKindaFuture too much, but the role of intermediaries are really important. They have their relationships with schools that employers cover, and so those organisations like MyKindaFuture are really plugged in and well connected in this space. So if employers are wanting to reach out and offer support to schools, organisations like us will prove really useful in that. And when things return to what we're going to call normal, the organisations and employers that have helped the schools and supported schools through this time will really be at the front of that queue in when schools are getting back to be inundated with offers, and it being a really crowded space. They'll remember those employers that reached out to help and show understanding and support during this time. So really, my kind of takeaway from that question is invest now, and as an employer you really will reap those benefits from those schools. That they really will remember you.
Fantastic, thanks, Steph. I think that's a really strong and important message, isn't it? So thank you. And then the final question, Steph, is around work experience. And I know there's a lot we can share here, and I am conscious of time. So when it comes to work experience, how can they be delivered, and really importantly, what do employers need to factor in to ensure that it's a really great experience for the user, because that obviously then ultimately will benefit the employer. So what are some of the key things that employers need to be doing, Steph? If you could just cover off some key points there.
Sure, and yeah, as you've highlighted, there's a lot to talk about and discuss in terms of digital work experience. But a key factors is having as little platforms for the young person to access as possible. So we're developing our own digital work experience offer, and we're just utilising Connector as that one platform. So really streamlining the number of platforms that you're using. No need for student interaction. So we're making sure we give students the option of online content, but also offline content for that social mobility piece for those young people that might not have consistent access to the internet, making it project-based and really focusing on the individual student's journey throughout that digital work experience, being really clear and concise with the briefs and the projects that these young people will have to take on. Giving some insights into recruitment, and going back to some of my previous answers around providing some clarity on your response to COVID as a employer will be really useful. Insight into working culture as much as possible. So that's one of the things that is probably the most challenging to replicate in digital work experience as opposed to face-to-face. So any insight into the working culture and hearing from employees. Again, as important with face-to-face, solving real-life problems is at the core of a really meaningful digital work experience. But one of most importantly, and my last point on this, is that the future is bright. You know, these young people are really kind of they're coming into the start of their career at a really turbulent time. So that message, the future is bright, there will be opportunities, and as an employer, you'll be there to support them. Will be vital in any sort of digital work experience or engagement.
Brilliant, thanks, Steph. And yeah, I think that last point is such an important one about that message that there is a bright future for them, because a lot of what they'll be hearing will be doom and gloom. And I think the other piece, Steph, and I know you've been tight on time today for what we need to cover, but the other piece I think that we're certainly advocating and supporting is splitting your work experience with a mix of digital and at some point in the future, where possible, face-to-face, because that is still hugely valuable, and for young people to see actually a work environment, to be in a work environment, is really impactful, isn't it, Steph?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are advocating for perhaps 3 days digital now and 2 days face-to-face in autumn or when we're able to do those. Yeah, definitely that option is something that we're exploring. There's still really meaningful impact from that face-to-face and the mix of digital.
Brilliant, fantastic, thanks, Steph. And then the final thing I thought might be useful, Steph. Sorry, thank you, Steph. I think that's a really good point. And final thought I thought might be useful to share, Steph, is actually an experience of what we've done for some of our clients. I know employers always like to hear about what other organisations have done. So just want to touch on perhaps an example or two of what has actually happened with some of our clients when it's come to how we've helped them adapt.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously we work with a really broad range of clients, and one of the clients that I work quite closely with is Dentsu Aegis network. We've wrote a case study for them because we feel particularly proud of the way we've been able to pivot the direction of that campaign and the delivery of the activity that they're doing. So as an organisation and an employer, they really do have a great history, not just with MKF, but as an organisation in themselves, of running really meaningful engagement and inspiration with young people as part of their CSR objectives. We had a lot of planned face-to-face activity for the spring and summer terms, and kind of span to the diversity of face-to-face activity. So they had work experience, insight days, workshops, assemblies, every sort of form of face-to-face offering that we have at MKF, we were doing with them. And in the space of a week, we have completely pivoted that face-to-face activity into a digital offering. So we are now offering digital work experience. We're offering online competitions through Connector, which we're doing in partnership with Dentsu and WWF. And we're also doing some virtual hackathons and looking at promoting their gamified application process as an opportunity for young people to explore that application process that they wouldn't otherwise have come into contact with. So we're really trying to be innovative, we're being flexible and working really quickly with them, and they're really open to the opportunities that we can gain through digital. And one of the real positives that going digital allows us to open these opportunities to students that don't live in big cities, that otherwise would not have got these opportunities. And it's allowing a real broader range of students from different geographies to engage that wouldn't have been able to do so face to face.
Fantastic, thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, and I think that's such a great point, is that, you know, inevitably in tough times like this, it's difficult to see the positives, but I think that's such a great one, is that opportunity for it to be extended more broadly and for more young people, particularly in some of those cold spots around the UK, to have these experiences. So Steph, listen, thank you very much. You shared lots of really great stuff there. So thank you for that. I'm now going to flip slightly to and ask my colleague Jack to share some insights into attracting and hiring apprentices, and how that needs to and has changed in this current climate. As with what we've done with Steph, we've got 3 questions that I'll pose to Jack, and then he'll share his insights. So Jack, first one, what are some of the main challenges that apprentice employees, and I'm guessing lots of people on this webinar today, will be experiencing and facing? What are you seeing, Jack?
Yeah, thank you, Simon. So before I jump into some slightly more specific challenges that are particularly relevant at the moment, there is one overarching sort of theme to the challenges that employers are facing in these times, and that is one thing that everybody needs to be making sure they're doing is remembering and putting a focus on the reason you have these apprenticeship programs in the first place. There are lots of different reasons that may be. It could be to address diversity issues, fill skills gaps, anything, but you know, those missions haven't gone away, while it's not necessarily the easiest thing to think about while you're panicking about resourcing or you know, trying to just make sure that everybody's still engaged with the business, it is definitely a really important thing to keep in the back of our minds in volatile times. With some specific challenges though at the moment that we're seeing, you know, Steph talked a lot about the uncertainty that students and employers are facing, and the school career leaders, and those obviously overlap a fair bit. You know, students are nervous about their grades, and employers are having to sort of think about how they're going to address these issues in their recruitment processes. There's also the problems with flipping your application process to a digital one. We've talked a lot about virtual work experience. Virtual assessment days are also taking off, and things like having to do face-to-face interviews over Skype. There's been a real pivot from all organizations to have to get that done quite quickly, and there's a lot of thought sharing going on in the industry at the moment about how to do that. But with your current apprentices, there's a lot to think about, and it gets particularly tricky if, for example, furlough is involved. Apprentices can still do their off-the-job training while they're on furlough, but they can't do their official work. And from an apprentice perspective, that adds another layer of uncertainty, because if you've come in on an 18-month apprenticeship, are you now looking at that being pushed back by a few months? Are you going to hope to catch up at some point? It just raises a lot of questions, and that is going to be a problem that employers have to face at some point or another, is how do we bring these apprentices back, and at what pace do we bring them back? And I mean, really, with all of this, there's a lot of talk going on about employers' brands during this time, and that they're going to be defined by your company's attitude and approach towards the current situation. And it's completely true. And the handling of this crisis, everybody wants to be the one that, when everybody looks back at this process, they're the one that got it right. And your company brand and your EVP will be a big talking point. And if future candidates will be very easily able to look back and see how your employees and apprentices were treated during that time. And so there's a lot of pressure to get that right and be seen to be being an employer that is looking after its people. And and you want to be able to roll it back out again quickly is a big part of it. You want to be able to, as with all of your employees, get back to full productivity as soon as possible, and your apprentices are no different in that equation. So there's a lot of moving parts, and with all of this, a lot of uncertainty, and the big challenges employers are facing is how to juggle a lot of the different issues that are coming up at the moment.
Fantastic, thank you, Jack, and thank you for that context. And I'm sure lots of people listening on this webinar today will own views will resonate with what you've shared, because we've all had to do this at such tremendous pace and stepping into so many unknowns. So let's get into some specifics, Jack. So how can we maintain high engagement levels with apprentice candidates when that candidate journey is longer and there is more uncertainty?
Yeah, absolutely. So we already know that with Generation Z in particular, that they're already looking for that short and sharp application process. They don't want to be waiting weeks between calls. They don't want a really long, drawn out process. So this is an issue that already existed that's just been exacerbated. And there are two slants to it. If you're a larger organization, you potentially have the resources and the need to use technology to handle that candidate interaction and keeping them warm throughout the process. As Steph and Simon both mentioned, we've got our connector platform that we know kind of has that impact on things like reneg rates, Glassdoor ratings, and there are obviously other tools out there. But you don't necessarily, perhaps as a smaller organization or as an organization that doesn't take a massive cohort of apprentices, have the resource or need to use a piece of tech, and you're going to be looking at a more personalized approach. The goal really is the same for both types of organization. You're really just aiming to make sure that nobody feels like they're left in the dark. Like I said, they don't want to be waiting a long time between updates, but we appreciate that you may be in a situation where you don't have an update, but even just letting candidates know that, maybe a weekly update, we don't necessarily have a new perhaps assessment center date for you, or we can't offer any insight as to when these telephone interviews are going to take place, but even just letting candidates know that it's being sorted, and that we've not forgotten you, we've not cancelled the program. It's just about being clear and just being very upfront and honest. And again, coming back to that employer branding piece, building that sense of, okay, this is an organization that's looking out for me, they're not keeping me in the dark, that will pay dividends throughout the application process and hopefully beyond. for that candidate, and you're already starting to build that sense of engagement with those candidates.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, and I think that's such a good point about even if you haven't got news of now we've got dates, now we're going to do it like this, just keeping in touch with them so they don't feel forgotten about, I think is really, really important, because there's such a risk, and we're all guilty of this, when there's a lack of information and a void, we just fill it with something. And the last thing you want to do when you spent, huge amounts of money getting people into your process is for them to disengage because they're just not hearing anything. And also, just thinking about how you can leverage your existing talent to connect with those individuals. So, Jack talked about our connector platform, which has got the digital buddies and digital mentors in it, or whether you can just set up to have a live call, on a chat room or something where those candidates can talk to existing apprentices within your organization. It's all about keeping them connected and engaged. So thanks, Jack. Lots of really good thoughts in there. And then final question, Jack, how candidate experience, everyone on this call will know how important that is. We've seen everyone looking to raise their game every year when it comes to providing a great candidate experience, because we know what impact that has on our brand, we know what impact that has on conversion rates, offer accept rates, and so on, and reducing renege rates. So what can employers do to continue to provide a really great candidate experience when there's potentially a much longer onboarding period, Jack? So, some companies are uncertain about start dates, and or have made the decision they're going to push start dates back. What can employers do to continue to make sure that the candidate experience is a positive one, Jack?
Yeah, absolutely. So like you just said, we've already seen some companies push it back to January, and some are just saying that we're hoping for September, but obviously that's subject to change. So in either case, you're either looking at a longer pre-boarding phase or onboarding phase, or you're looking at one that's just sort of wrought with uncertainty. And even in the event that things do start to slowly return to whatever normal looks like over the back half of 2020, we're just not confident, or we can't be certain at the moment, that traditional keep warm strategies that rely on face-to-face interactions, such as inviting candidates in for a day with the team or going out for a lunch, something like that, we don't know yet whether that's going to be a reliable method of keeping in touch. So you're going to have to be, employers going to have to be developing pre-boarding and onboarding strategies that rely on remote and virtual communications. And for me, there's two aspects to that. There's one that's really focusing on maintaining a level of one-to-one communication. It's all well and good having building real group communities and group connections, which I'll talk about in a second. But at the end of the day, as an incoming apprentice, you want to be initially building that relationship with your line manager. You want to be, maybe have a buddy system again, or use some kind of mentoring service. But you want to be making sure that you're fostering those sort of personal and personalized relationships from an early stage, particularly if they are looking at potentially missing out on an extra 3-4 months of this apprenticeship and having that pushed back. If a candidate got offered the job back in December 2019 and not going to be starting till January 2021, that's a long time to almost fall out of love with the idea of doing this apprenticeship. And so you want to be making sure that you're not throwing quite generic messaging at them. You want it to be that personalized. And again, when we talk about building a sense of engagement and belonging, one-to-one communication is really important there. And then secondly, it's still really important that you do foster these group connections. So there's loads of different methods for this. You can create LinkedIn groups for your cohorts. Like Simon just said, leveraging your existing talent pool is a really, really important thing. Having them share their experiences, be on hand to answer any small questions that perhaps an apprentice feels a bit nervous about asking their manager. Just having another apprentice or another graduate on hand is a really important thing. So yeah, things like LinkedIn groups, you can do team Zoom calls. There are lots of different tools out there for things like forums. If we think about even ourselves, we've had to all adjust to maintaining work relationships in a virtual world, and you're seeing loads of different things of team quizzes and all sorts of social events virtually. There's no reason that your incoming apprentices can't begin to get involved in those kind of activities as and when their start date or hopeful start date comes nearer. Depending on age groups, you might be looking at problems with traditional social media, particularly if you're looking at sort of younger school leavers, and that's where a secure tool, for example Connector or others, can come in quite handy with that safeguarding function. But yeah, effectively the key messaging is that there's more than one type of communication, and both are equally as important, and it's important that your strategy, whatever that ends up looking like, is encompassing both.
Fantastic, thank you, Jack. And I really like that point about the last thing you want them doing is falling out of love with you because it's taken so long. So I think that's a really great way of putting it, when actually what we want is candidates, particularly post-offer, to be falling in love with us and our business. So I think that's a really nice way of putting it. So Jack, thank you very much for what you've shared there. So what we thought we'd do now, before we go into questions, is I'm just going to ask Jack and Steph just to share some kind of final thoughts before we go into the Q&A, which Tom from the ISE will manage in terms of asking the questions. So Steph, if you want to go first, just I guess reflecting on the 3 points that we've put there, what would be your key takeaways?
I think for me, it's about clear and consistent communication. That ties into some of what Jack was saying as well. So that clear, consistent, personalised communication will be really important. Underpinning all your outreach and engagement with a sense of empathy, and offering the support now to really reap the benefits in the future.
Thank you, Steph. Really good. And Jack?
Yeah, for me, it comes back to what I said right at the start of my bit. It's about remembering why you have these programs, and to somewhat mirror Steph, being honest and upfront at the moment will pay those dividends, and you want to be seen as an organisation that is handling this the right way. And I believe the right way to do that is to be clear and be very honest with your potential apprentices.
Wonderful. Jack, thank you very much. So Jack and Steph, thank you for what you've shared. We're now going to move into Q&A. So Tom, if you're, hopefully questions have been coming through. So if you want to be asking those questions, and then Steph and Jack can respond.
Of course. Yeah, we've got a few questions actually. So we'll start with Carol's asked about recruitment, so I think this one's towards Jack really, and it's a really good question. I think it's on everyone's mind, especially in the employer space, which is, do you think that employers will continue to embrace virtual and remote tech in recruitment after the COVID pandemic?
Yeah, a really interesting question, and definitely a hot topic at the moment. I think they will, to the extent they will. I can't be sure. I definitely don't think we're headed for a world, nor should we be heading for a world where face-to-face is taken out of an application process or a recruitment process. I think things like final interviews, things like assessment days still offer a really valuable tool to both the employer and the employee. And I think it would, what it does offer is potentially a more flexible approach to your recruitment process. And hopefully what we'll see is a situation where perhaps you don't need to be running an assessment centre and then a final interview. You could be perhaps doing an assessment centre so that the school leavers, your apprentices, get to see the organisation, meet some of the staff, go to the office, and then potentially that final interview could be done digitally. Yeah, I think it's one that's going to be really interesting to watch. I don't personally see it going the way of digital taking over. I think there will be a place for both, but I think it's really important that companies are flexible and able to adapt to whatever the situation may be at the time.
Perfect, thanks, Jack. Next questions. I think we've got 2 questions from sixth form colleges and schools, so I think this is going to be towards Steph. First one is from John Morrison. So he says, hi, as a careers manager at sixth form college, I completely agree with Stephanie's comments regarding challenges of teachers and careers leaders, practitioners. As the college career service team, we share the same concern with the lack of face-to-face engagement with our students and how to meet the Gatsby benchmarks digitally. We're looking at ways to engage with employers and apprenticeship providers at this time. How can we, as a sixth form college, find out the latest recruitment news and what interactive activities are available from employers and apprenticeship providers?
Yeah, fantastic question, and I know a lot of career leaders will be wondering the same thing. At MyKindaFuture, a quick plug for us, we've just launched a career leader our connector, so our own version of connector, where we're pooling opportunities for schools to engage with employers. And we still have activity happening in this time. It's just going virtual, and we do foresee that continuing. We have interest from a lot of employers in terms of offering support digitally, so that is one good place to go. I utilise LinkedIn a lot. As a careers leader, that would be a great place to go to see the different offerings from employers in your area. In terms of specifics, it would depend on whereabouts in the country you are, and then I could signpost you to some opportunities, but my email's there in that slide, so do feel free to email me the name of your college and your location, and I will send through some opportunities for you to engage with.
I think, thanks, Steph. Tom, sorry, it's Simon here. So one other comment to make is obviously the ISE itself, is a membership organisation for hundreds of employers. So the ISE itself is obviously another great place to get insights into what's available. So for all our members, there's all kinds of information that's available on the website. So do use the ISE as well. Thanks, Tom.
Thank you. No, I was literally going to say the same thing, but obviously John knows that as well. But I think also sometimes, especially during these kind of situations, people just want a bit more and a few extras, don't we, just to kind of help and support. Next question is from Mohammed. I'm just going to see. It could be to either, actually. I think I'll read out the question and then the MKF team can decide. What comms channels are working best during these times? Is there a best practice around the frequency of communicating with the school leaver and apprentice talent?
Yeah, I'm assuming from an employer's perspective, one of the things that we do at MyKindaFuture, as I said, is particularly in my team and Steph's team actually, is handle the attraction for apprenticeship opportunities, and we do a lot of outreach directly to schools, but also with the online piece, there's a variety of various job boards that directly link your opportunities with school leaver talent. In my opinion, one of the most underrated ones is UCAS's Career Finder site. It's completely free to post on as an employer and actually does get quite a bit of traction. And then we are seeing, or at least I'm seeing, a bit of an uptick in school leavers using LinkedIn as a place for finding themselves opportunities. We know that in the graduate market, it's been a slightly reliable tool for a little while now for picking up quite committed candidates for various graduate opportunities, but I am starting to see more people in that school leaver apprenticeship age bracket using it as a tool to share their kind of stories, but more importantly link in with industry people and industry recruiters in the hopes of landing them an apprenticeship or something similar that works for them.
Perfect, thank you.
Tom, I've just had a couple of thoughts actually as well. I think one of the things always to remember, and a lot of you I'm sure will probably know this, job boards definitely work without question, but I think one of the things always to remember about job boards is the way most users use them is when they know what they are looking for. Whereas engaging directly with schools and colleges gives you the opportunity to get to them who maybe still haven't made their mind up or are not sure. So for me, you know, any campaign or activity that you're doing definitely's got to cover both bases. That's how you'll get the broadest and most diverse pool of potential talent, looking at the opportunities that you've got to offer. So that would be the only other caveat. Tom, there was another part of the question, I think, which is around how often.
Yes.
Should that comms take place? Was that right, Tom?
Yeah, yeah,
so
that's
Steph,
correct.
Have you got any thoughts from a school's point of view? Yeah, Steph, from a school's point of view, what's too much comms? So about an opportunity to a school, and I know it's going to vary massively, but do you have some sense of that?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and actually, you know, our in my team, although we're starting to look at direct communications with end users and young people, our main mode of communications is through career leaders and with schools. And I've been seeing on LinkedIn that a few are you know, feeling a bit overloaded because we're all rushing to offer our digital offerings. So we do initial outreach to schools at the outset of a campaign, and then we would, you know, once a month is probably a good way of going. If you're not getting responses no more than 3, it's kind of like a general rule of thumb. But as you said, Simon, it really it depends on the campaign and the offering.
And also, I think there's a piece as well, isn't there, Steph? Because again, and this is just 101 marketing. So again, I appreciate lots of you will probably practice this already. Is when you're reaching out to schools and colleges. And an analogy I always talk about is don't treat them like a job centre. That's not what they are. They're an educational establishment.
Yeah.
So share useful stuff with them as well. So it's not just we've got this great opportunity, we want your students to apply, but share useful stuff. And again, just reflecting on some of the stuff that both Steph and Jack shared in terms of help them understand what's going on in the market, help them understand how you feel about, you know, what's going to happen with grades this year. Use it as an opportunity to grow their knowledge and make them feel more informed. I think will definitely, my sense is, Steph, that will really help the comms land better. Would that be absolutely a fair comment, Steph?
Yeah, that absolutely, and also going back to that point we made about within that comms as well, how are we helping them to support their goals? So how is the opportunity helping them reach their Gatsby benchmarks, and how is it meaningful for those young people? But yeah, definitely giving them something as well, rather than just asking.
Perfect, thank you. So Amandeep's got 2 questions. I'm gonna one question is an ISE related one, which is, are there plans for ISE to create a job board to capture all opportunities? Possibly yes. Amandeep, please contact me offline. This might be something that we'll be looking into, or at least links to our employer members so that schools and colleges, our schools and colleges members can link to those employers who have opportunities. The main question that Amandeep asked for to MKF, which I will read out right now. So Amandeep asked, Stephanie highlighted the safeguarding issues schools are facing with, but on the flip side, we found that the situation has created opportunities too, i.e. pupils all being online, whereas this was a struggle when physically in schools, and also greater capacity within pupil timetables to include careers with certain subjects not working as well as online. I've seen a lot of webinars and talks, but are you finding many employers are putting in place new virtual year 11 work experience for the summer or May half term? And if so, where can pupils and careers leads find them? Or are these only open to pupils who had originally applied?
Yeah, really interesting question. Kind of smiled to myself because we, you know, one of the things we say often is year 11's really tricky year to engage with. And so I think it would just take a little bit of time to change that mindset and actually say there might be some capacity to engage with year 11's during this time. And that will actually be a huge draw for some employers. because you know they're a coveted year group to engage with. We do have opportunities that for them to engage with, and a lot of the opportunities we had open pre-COVID, the application windows have you know, we've continued the application windows so that other people can engage now that some of the opportunities are going digital. Another positive of going digital is that actually you can engage with a lot more young people than you may have been able to do face to face. So in a lot of instances, we are increasing the number of young people that can engage, which means that the application windows are still open. But again, please do contact me and I can send the specific opportunities your way.
Perfect, thanks, Steph. And we have one last question, and unless obviously there's still time for you guys on the webinar to put your questions in the box. This one's from Will Mason. Do you expect to see the peak for opening apprenticeship recruitment campaigns to happen later next year? So I think that would be for Jack, I guess.
Yeah, potentially, or Simon, if you've got any data from the ISE that supports that. Instinctively, the peak for opening applications being later next year, personally, I think it's too early to say. I don't think we're certain enough yet, even about how this year is going to shape up in terms of when these candidates are going to be able to start. I think if you see, obviously, this year's apprenticeship cohort being pushed back to January, you may see a bit of a knock-on effect from there. But Simon, unless you've got any data to answer the question.
Yeah, I don't have any data, but I have too many decades of experience and seen various, what we're all pretty much accepting of is a recession, and the question is how quickly we bounce back from it. But if my instinct is as to what I think is likely to happen, and to say, please, the big caveat to this question is I don't have any data to back this out. This is just having lived through about 3 different recessions. I think what I suspect is likely to happen is where there is data from our friends at the ISE, then we can definitely see that numbers are down for this year. But in terms of going forward so for the 2021 intake, my instinct of what I think is likely to happen is initial hiring numbers will be lower. But I think firms will want to go to market as early as they possibly can as normal, because they'll be wanting to compete for the best talent. I don't see anything that around COVID or lockdown that will change that desire to get the best and the need to go early to market to do that. So I think my instinct is most companies will seek to go live in the autumn term as normal. But as I say, I suspect with potentially lower numbers of opportunities, but with hope / expectation that as we move through to the end of this calendar year and into early next year, and we get a bit more certainty, those numbers may then increase. So my instinct is that could well be something that we see as initially people going to market at the normal time in the autumn term. And as we've seen over the last couple of years, and again, there's really good ISE data to back this up, more and more companies are going live for their apprentice opportunities in the autumn term now and not leaving it until the spring term. So I think it was 2 years ago, something like 33% were live in the autumn term, and last year it was over 50%. So we're definitely seeing that happening. But I do suspect it will be lower numbers, but with a hope that as the market picks up, they will increase their numbers, but later in the calendar year. So that would be my view, Tom.
Okay, thank you. Stephen Green asked a question which was similar. Well, actually, it wasn't similar to the last question, but Simon, you literally just answered it. So thanks to Stephen for your question. And he's put another question to say, I think it has been answered, which is correct. So that's it for questions. Simon and the team at MKF, is there anything, I know you've done your kind of final thoughts, but from the questions, is there anything that kind of comes to mind, maybe just to wrap up today?
Just one thing.
Go, Steph.
Sorry, just one thing from me for the career leaders that are on the webinar. Just want to put out the offering. Please do contact me. MyKindaFuture are there as a completely free resource for educators and career leaders, and we just want to be able to support you during this time. So my email is there, so please do reach out to find out what offerings we currently have and what we're coming up for the summer term. Thanks, Simon.
Thanks, Tom. I'm just going to build on that, really. I think firstly say thank you, Tom, and the ISE for hosting the webinar today. It's much appreciated. Big thanks to Steph and Jack, who've done a lot of prep ahead of today to share what you have. And that's my final comment, really. You know, it's a huge cliche now already in such a short period of time, but these really are uncharted waters, unprecedented times. And I think the way we are going to come out of this stronger is by sharing. Those of you who aren't on the ISE WhatsApp apprenticeship group, please message Tom at the ISE to get you onto that. It's a really good, vibrant group through that WhatsApp group with a specific focus on apprentices and school leavers. So if you're not part of it, do join it, and there are other ones across the ISE. But it's by sharing what's going on and what we're finding and what we're experiencing is how we are going to get through this, and not just get through it, come out stronger. And certainly we here at MyKindaFuture want to play our part in that, and we're always happy to share the experiences we've had with the work that we've done with a really broad range of companies in a broad range of sectors, offering hiring all kinds of different volumes of apprentices. So please, if you just want to bounce some ideas off or get some more insight, please, just as Steph said, do get in touch, and we want to be part of how we come out of this stronger. So thank you all very much indeed for taking part today, and thanks, Tom.
Thank you very much, Simon, and yeah, thanks for everyone for attending today. If you have any colleagues that weren't able to attend, the recording will go up on the website probably within a few hours after the live event now. And obviously do check your emails and check the website for upcoming other webinars and podcasts and all the other ISE resources. And without using the cliche terms that Simon's already used, you know, during these times, you know, we are here to help. So anything you need, please do get in contact with the ISE. And I hope everyone has a lovely week. Thank you very much. Bye.